Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we are going to be talking about Rogue. These are my initial thoughts on Rogue coming out of it, and to use a phrase, this is what the Doctor ordered for me. I've been saying for a while that I've wanted a more traditional Doctor Who episode, basically one that's not playing with the formula too much, because I felt that as good as I found episodes like Boom, 73 Yards, and Dot and Bubble, they've all been pretty good. None of them are what I would call a traditional Doctor Who story. Boom is the closest to that, and even then, it's slightly unconventional in the way the Doctor is stationary for the entirety of the plot. This is Doctor Who at its most Doctor Who, in my opinion, which is ironic because it's written by two new writers, Kate Herron and Brienne Redman, I believe are their names, who I think they directed it, season 1 of Loki, or maybe they wrote it. I'm not sure. Someone will correct me in the comments, but either way, I thought they did a good job. This was a good, solid episode of Doctor Who. I won't say it's as strong as probably Dot and Bubble, or in hindsight, I think 73 Yards has grown on me on rewatch. Actually, maybe I would say it's better than Dot and Bubble. I don't know, they're very different episodes. Anyway, getting into the plot of it. So, there is a ball happening in 1813, and it is basically a very, Bridgerton-esque ball that's being infiltrated by shapeshifters, who we learn are in fact not only shapeshifters, but the reason they are shapeshifting is because they're basically interdimensional cosplayers. They like to dress up and pretend to be these figures from different eras and parts of the universe, parts of the world, and they wanted to basically be early 18th century aristocrats. So that's what they do. They wanted to be like Bridgerton, as Ruby says. And by the way, the Bridgerton joke isn't nearly as repetitive as it looked in the trailers. They said Bridgerton about 15 times in the trailers for this episode. It was a lot less here, which I appreciate. There was twists in this I wasn't expecting. Something I got to talk about immediately is the character of Rogue, who is played by Jonathan Groff, who played Hamilton, who didn't play Hamilton, sorry, he played King George in Hamilton. That's how I know him. And he was fantastic. He plays a bounty hunter who is set to get rid of the shapeshifter birds, who I think were called the Cholder. And he basically suspects the Doctor is one of them, until he reveals, no, I'm not a shapeshifter, I'm a Time Lord, da 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 da. The elephant in the room, of course, is that they have romantic chemistry. And I will say, even though the character is not Captain Jack, he is the most Captain Jack-coded character I think I've ever seen, and I don't think that was unintentional. I think very much he was supposed to be like that. I wonder if in an earlier draft they wanted to use Captain Jack, maybe, but obviously that couldn't necessarily be the case because, I mean, the backstory's pretty much entirely the same. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy that character and I enjoy the sort of unspoken loss that they suffer, but yeah, the character is basically Jack. Their name is Rogue. They're a good character, but I did think it is Jack. It is literally Jack with a different name. I will say, though, for what it was, I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I guess he's more serious than Jack was, but other than that, pretty similar. I think one of my criticisms of this episode coming out of it initial thoughts, I felt that this did a really good job of keeping the Doctor front and stage, which I've missed, obviously, given that Dot and Bubble and 73 Yards have him in extremely small roles. Well, I mean, Dot and Bubble isn't as small, but you know what I mean? He's not sort of front and centre. So I liked having a Doctor that was more front and centre this go around. The trade-off there, though, is that I feel like I don't know Ruby as well as I should know her by this point. Don't get me wrong, Millie Gibson is absolutely crushing the performance of the character, and I think she is so much of the reason that I enjoy Ruby Sunday so much. But on a character and writing level, I can't help but feel like there's a missing page almost, because there's a scene in this where the Doctor says, oh yeah, Ruby, she's my best friend, and I'm sort of like, I don't know whether she's been with you long enough for that to be the case, or at least we haven't seen that on screen. Don't get me wrong, we've seen chemistry of them on screen, but best friend this soon? Do you know what I mean? I feel like I've missed some of their development. I feel like a chapter has kind of been missed out of the book, if you like. And that's not to say the performances are at fault. They're definitely not. I almost think, I don't know, some of the pacing of their relationship's a bit weird. Like, I kind of wish they'd have taken it slower, because it seems like they've gone pretty instantly from not knowing each other to best friends within the span of a couple of adventures. And I almost think there needs to be, because one of my criticisms of their dynamic so far is that there hasn't been much conflict between the two, and that's definitely still the case. I'm hoping the finale results in some sort of big breakup. We do get a death fake out where the Doctor believes the Cholder have taken Ruby Sunday's body, because obviously they don't just switch bodies, they literally absorb the bodies of the people and kill them in the process. But obviously she manages to escape the Cholder and kills it instead. We get a Susan Twist cameo with the painting, which I thought was well done. Actually, there's a teaser trailer for The Legend of Ruby Sunday that's in this as well, which I thought was very, very interesting. Obviously, we've seen Mal in that as well. I loved the scene, a lot of the scenes with the Doctor and Rogue, particularly when they're showing off their ships to each other. And the Doctor plays a bit of Kylie Minogue on his ship, and then he shows him the TARDIS, and he starts like mouthing Pure Imagination, the Willy Wonka song, obviously because it's like a mystical world he's entering. Really liked that. I think the Doctor was written really well here. I think it was written, this one felt, and this is going to sound weird, but it's one of the ones that felt the most like it was written with Ncuti Gatwa in mind. And what I mean by that is, you look at something like, I think Boom is the most prominent example for me, where you look at it, and as great as I think Boom is, a lot of the lines feel like they're just the 12th Doctor. And don't get me wrong, the Doctor is the same character regardless of who's playing them. But I do think that each Doctor has their own cadence and manner of speaking, and I think this one really reflected Gatwa for me. There's scenes in this that I can only imagine him doing, but also they feel doctorate. I love the scene where, to cause a ruckus for the Cholder, the Rogue character proposes to the Doctor, and he sort of gets really flustered in that moment. He looks at the ring and says, I can't do this. Which I like to believe is a kind of nod to River, perhaps, the last time, he was married to someone, and how that ended. I wonder if that was part of that. I also found it interesting that towards the end of this one, we get a scene where the Doctor stops for a moment. He goes, right, yep, let's carry on. And I almost think the Gatwa Doctor does this thing of, he knows he needs to be fine, he knows he wants to be having fun, but he almost tries too hard to be happy. And I think that's an interesting way to take the character post 14th Doctor and therapy and all the rest of that. I forgot to even mention the elephant in the room. Richard E. Grant's Shelker Doctor gets shadow canonised in this. You get a scene where the ship of Rogue is scanning the Doctor, and they show all of his faces on a little hologram. You get 10 in there twice, so that does confirm 14 and 10, two separate incarnations. But also, you get Joe Martin in there, and you do get Richard E. Grant, who played the Shelker Doctor in Screw the Shelker, which I thought was an incredibly cool inclusion. Yeah, so overall thoughts, this one is good. I'm trying to think of other things I have not mentioned. I thought the Cholder, cool concept. I don't think they're particularly complicated, but I also don't think they needed to be. I really liked the prosthetics of it. I think the core focus was on the dynamic between 15 and Rogue, respectively. Again, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate that I think some of the development with Ruby and their dynamic has kind of taken a backseat or not really had the focus I would like. Equally, I would also say I really liked the scene where We get a flashback moment where the Doctor thinks Ruby has been killed by the Cholder to be used as cosplay, and we get a flashback to him basically telling Carla, I promise I will keep her safe. Really, really effective. I'm glad that scene was still in there. I was worried, given that he was in the same costume in the trailer as Dot and Bubble. That didn't make the cut of the series. Thank goodness it did. I thought it was really lovely as well. Ending credits had a tribute to William Russell, who, for those of you who perhaps don't know your Doctor Who that well, played Ian Chesterton in the very first episodes of Doctor Who with William Hartnell, the first Doctor, and he recently passed away, and they managed to get in loving memory of William Russell in the credits, even though, it only happened fairly recently, which I thought, just a nice little touch that I thought was really good. I can imagine there's going to be some people annoyed by the romance stuff. I mean, all I could say to that is, again, this isn't new. Captain Jack, Exhibit A. I do find it somewhat funny that there was a supposed queer romance for the last 2 series of the show, and yet in the span of 45 minutes, there was more to that in this than there was in the entire Chibnall era. I know that's mean. I know that's been, that means a lot to people, and some people might see it as low-hanging fruit, but I almost can't help but make the comparison, given how much attention that got in the previous run by people who watched it, compared to this, where, obviously, I went in expecting there to be something between the Doctor and Rogue, but I think the fact that it already felt more defined than Thasmin did in 2 series, since it was kind of teased, I should say, does feel significant to me and does feel like it's worth addressing. That is one thing I will say. I've seen a lot of people talking about the characterization of this run, and while I will say, I do have issues with it, it is a marked step up from the previous era. I'd say that's across the board for me personally, including, I want to give a shout out to the score. I think Murray Gold, again, absolutely smashes it. There's some really, really cool bits in this, like cool motifs. There's a little bit of like horror, but there's also a little bit like ambient, and there's also a little bit of like sort of like elements of obviously the period, and I really think the music nails it. So yeah, honestly, I think this is another solid episode. There hasn't been a single episode that I've disliked, to be completely. Even Space Babies, which I would say for this run, this 8-episode run, has been by far the weakest. I still thought it was fine. It's in the same realm as me for something like New. It's in the same realm to me as something like New Earth, where it's not my favourite by any stretch of the imagination, but I sort of look at it and I go, it's just one of those sort of mediocre introduction ones, I think a lot more of my issues with this series do come down to, one, I just don't think there's enough episodes for the type of series that this is, because this is the first debatably normal episode since Space Babies, and it's episode 6, and episode 7 and 8 are finale episodes. I don't think for the type of run this is, 8 episodes is enough. It's almost like it's still being written with that original 12 to 13 episode run in mind, and I don't think it quite works. I think going forward, you either need to change the formatting to reflect 8 episodes more, i.e. make it somewhat more serialized or have a more overarching plot, in the vein of something like Flux, but, a bit more coherent, for lack of a better term. Or you just have more episodes. Obviously, we know for season 2 there isn't going to be more episodes, but I hope that going forward that is something that's on the table, because I am feeling the restrictions of the 8-episode runtime. It was nice to see some more TARDIS action in this episode as well. It felt somewhat absent from the rest of the episodes of this run, so it was nice to see it, because I love that set, and I love the way it was lit in this. We also do get a TARDIS groan as well, which I thought was interesting. So they're carrying on there. So I'm wondering what the deal is there. Yeah. So overall, a good solid episode for me. I don't think it will ever be like, I don't think it'll be anyone's favorite of all time, but I can say with confidence it's one that I'm going to enjoy rewatching. I put it in a similar category to something like Unicorn the Wasp, or I'm trying to think of another like fun episode that maybe isn't like the peak of the season, but it is also very, very much fun, or like Boomtown, something like that, where it might not be the absolute peak of a season, but you're happy it's there, and you're happy to rewatch it, and that's definitely where I'm at with this one. Um, yeah, I think that's about everything. Did I cover everything? Was there anything I missed? I don't think there was. Yeah, I think Gatwa. I think Gatwa. This might be one of like the best in terms of his characterization. I think this one really got his Doctor in a way that I almost felt like. Obviously, not that I didn't know his Doctor before this. I did, but I almost feel like I don't know. The dialogue just felt more befitting of him in this one. I don't know whether that's just a case of Gout were slowly becoming more cemented in the role, or whether it's a case of different writers bringing in a fresh perspective. Oh, that was another thing. The at the very beginning, there's the dance implant earrings that have a battle mode, and that's how she escapes the shoulder. I thought that was fine. I did think when they were establishing it, that's a bit of a weird thing for them to have, but obviously it does get a payoff later. I almost think it should have had a moment akin to Church on Ruby Road where the Doctor shows them off physically, because you don't really see them. They just sort of do this on their ear, which, to be fair, probably a cost-saving thing, which I understand. But yeah, broadly, I thought this was directed really well. That was another thing. There's a really nice bit where the Doctor and Rogue are dancing in order to cause a scene, because it's the 1800s and it's two blokes. And the lighting goes dim. Really liked that. For some reason, I mean, I don't think it was, but there's a bit where she's fighting the shoulder to get away from being converted. I don't think it was I Need a Hero, but it almost felt like that. I was getting Shrek 2 vibes, especially with, you know, the ballroom scenes. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm probably going to miss something super obvious, like I did with the races in Dot Bubble last week. But that's the problem with doing these things at midnight, is you get my thoughts when I've not had time to properly formulate things. So that's why a lot of these early sort of videos are a lot of me just sort of rambling and putting together my own thoughts. What I will say is I enjoy doing them for that reason, because it's kind of like a time capsule of, okay, this is what I thought of this episode at this time, and whether that changes or stays the same. I think this one will stay relatively the same. Dot and Bubble got better for me on rewatch, to the point now where I think it's actually really, really good. With that additional messaging, I think it has an extra element to it. Same goes for 73 yards. 73 yards, I think, especially watching it at midnight, it's a bit of a weird one to watch at midnight because it is so esoteric and weird. Boom, I always thought was solid. Devil's Court, I always had fun with, and Space Babies is like, it's mediocre. It's fine, you know. So overall, I've not had an episode this run where I've gone, oh, really don't like that one. I've not had a Legend of the Sea Devils. I've not had Arachnids in the UK. I've not had a In the Forest of the Night. I've not had that. So in terms of a run, for me personally, it's one of the most solid in quite some time. Even Series 10, which I really, really like, has the Monk trilogy, which I've always found a bit ropey in places. I've not had an episode here where I'm like, oh, I might skip that. Do you know what I mean? I haven't had that, with the exception of possibly Space Babies, and I don't feel like it. But even then, I probably would, because it's only 45 minutes, and it is kind of important as the first trip for Ruby, I suppose. Interestingly enough, my mum's catching up on the series, and she finished Space Babies the other night, and she said, yeah, because obviously I've got her watching from the 60s onwards. She remembered 10, and then she's re-picking up here, and she said, yeah, I wouldn't watch that one again. That's my least favourite of the recent ones you've shown me. And I sort of went, yeah, the series does definitely get better as it goes along. At least I think it does. But some people will probably say that this is the worst episode ever, and I'm wrong. Other people will probably say that, you know, I'm paid to have these opinions, which I wish I was. I'll tell you that. You know, I'd be living in a mansion if that was the case. Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. What did you think about Rogue? I'm just babbling now. If you did enjoy this video, please should give it a like, comment down below your thoughts, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.